So, you're in the market for a C8 Corvette, and you're trying to decide which one you want to get. You've decided that you don't want to get the Stingray because you want to get maybe something a little bit more special, a little bit something different. You're in the market for something a little bit more unique in the sense of you have the C8 E-Ray and the Z06. What are the differences between the two? What are the pros and cons between them? So the Stingray maybe just doesn't do it enough for you. You want something with a little bit more features. You like the wide body, whatever. Okay, so there are a lot of differences between them that you can go across and figure out which one you want more. I own a C8 E-Ray. I've had it for about 7 months now, 8 months, and I can tell you I absolutely love it. I had a Z06 that I borrowed one time for about a week or so, and I can tell you some noticeable differences between the two cars. I've never owned a Z06, so if you really want an opinion, speak to a Z06 owner. But here's some of my takes on them. So me personally, this video is going to be very obviously subjective, and I'm also going to be extremely nitpicky. But if you're going to be spending that kind of money on a car, you're going to want to be a little bit of nitpicky. I know I did. So these are just some things about it. The E-Ray was a car that I was excited about from a long time. Ever since I heard about it years ago and it was coming out, I was very excited about it. I was excited about the shuttle and stealth modes. I was very excited about the all-wheel drive. And the fact that you can take an E-Ray and you can modify it to the point where you can keep increasing its power output, but you'll never be able to add an electric motor to a Z06 or a Stingray per se in that sense, unless you buy an E-Ray, to add that extra power in that all-wheel drive. You're just never going to be able to add it. Maybe you could if you had enough money or had enough connections, but it's going to be highly unlikely. So these are just some differences between them and some pros and cons in both as to maybe point you in the direction that you want to go. Okay, so first I'm going to start with the pros of the Z06. There are quite a few pros, but there's going to be the one that is going to be obviously the main one that everybody's going to go after, and that is the engine itself. The flat plane crank and the sound that comes with that engine. That seems to be the main selling point and the main thing that a lot of Z06 owners brag about that they have, is that they have that sound. It comes from its flat plane crank with its even firing order, and it's just going to give you that high-pitched scream that a lot of people are going to love and want. Me personally, this was a con, but I'll go over that a little bit later. That's a big deal with it. The other thing is that this is primarily going to be more of a track car. It's going to be more high focus in that sense. You have other options to you available, like the addition of the Z07 package, which you cannot get on an E-Ray. This is a little bit strange also too, because the E-Ray was sort of the replacement for the Grand Sport, at least so far. I also truly believe that the E-Ray is going to be discontinued and stopped after only a couple model years, and is going to be replaced with an upcoming Grand Sport. GM Chevy have not confirmed that yet, but I think that's going to be the case. You cannot get a Z07 package on an E-Ray. You can get a ZER package, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but you can't get a Z07. Now, for a car that was meant to be a replacement for the Grand Sport, per se, and not being able to get a Z07 package is kind of a little bit of a downer. So that's definitely a pro for the Z06, is that you can get that Z07 package. The better suspension, tighter suspension, the aero, the wings and things like that, and the strakes that go underneath and stuff like that. Now, it was a little odd they left this off the E-Ray to me, because you could get a previous generation of C7 Grand Sport with a Z07 package. Granted, it was very rare, but it was available to you. Now, the sound of this engine is obviously the big thing that a lot of people go for, and it has that even firing order in a flat plane crank V8, which gives you that high-pitched scream, much like a Ferrari or so like a V10 Lexus LFA. So it doesn't have that rumble that, say, the small block Chevy has that comes with the LT2 and other ones of the past. So a lot of people love that sound. Me personally, again, not my thing, but hey, everybody has their preferences. So this is going to be a big perk because of the even firing order. It gives you that sound. A lot of people love that. So it's also it's going to be significantly, or I wouldn't say significant, but it's definitely going to be lighter than an E-Ray. Give or take about 300 plus pounds lighter than an E-Ray. So it being a track-focused car, that is definitely going to be a big pro, that it's going to be faster around a track than an E-Ray is. However, an E-Ray is no slouch around a track, but a Z06, especially a Z07, is going to be faster around a track. Now, another advantage that a lot of people are going to be drawn to with the Z06 is that it has a bespoke engine to it, the LT6. This is going to be the only car that's going to have that LT6 engine. Now, that is a pro in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of a con in a lot of ways. Parts for it aren't going to be as readily available. You're going to have a hard time finding people that know how to work on it, so on and so forth. But it's definitely going to be unique to that car and make it special in that sense. Now, another advantage that the Z06 has over the E-Ray is that the Z06 does not have a hybrid all-wheel drive system or any type of hybrid technology. That is going to be something that a lot of people will worry about and may potentially scare them off a little bit. So it's a little bit simpler in that sense that it's going to be easier to work on in a lot of ways, not so much others, but you don't have to worry about the batteries or the motor or servicing the motor with the fluid and then the coolant systems that go with the hybrid systems and so on and so forth. So that's definitely going to be an advantage for the Z06, and because it also doesn't have all that hybrid technology, again, it's going to make it lighter. Now, another advantage to it is going to be is that for a fraction of a price of any other supercar, you're going to get supercar performance from that thing. To match it with anything else, like some sort of Italian exotic or any type of other exotic, you're going to be spending a lot more money than you would on a Z06. Now, granted, they're not exactly cheap cars, but compared to what they're competing against, it is going to be a lot cheaper. So another advantage to that is that you do have the highest horsepower production naturally aspirated V8 engine to date, okay, as of when this is made. I'm sure at some point that record will be broken, but as of right now, you do get the highest producing naturally aspirated horsepower engine, V8 engine ever made, especially in a GM car. So as awesome as the Z06 is, and it is awesome, because you're getting pretty much unmatched performance, especially at the price point, there are some cons to it as well. So some of those cons are some of the things that would kind of really bug me about the car if I had it as a daily driver. Now, I do this primarily as a daily driver kind of outlook on things because that's how I look at when I buy a car or whenever I'm using a car. I can't ever see myself having a car that I would use just for, say, track days or weekends or whatever, mostly because I don't really have the funding or the space to be able to have cars like that. So as a daily driver, one of the big con of the thing is, or the Z06, is that it just kind of never shuts up. It's always screaming, it's always yelling, it's always very loud and in your face. Now, this is a great thing for a car in very particular aspects. But there was a Top Gear episode where Jeremy Clarkson was talking about a series of, I believe it was a Jaguar F-Type, and he was talking about one thing how he hated about the car was that it just never shuts up, it never quiets down. And I kind of feel that's a little bit the same way about the Z06. There's sometimes you just want to drive the car and have it be quiet and cruise or whatever, and I'm sure it can for the most part, but to an extent, it never shuts up and it's never quiet. So that's a little bit of a con. You have to be willing to have a car that's going to be pretty much 100% of the time. The E-Ray, you can tame it down. The Z06, you can, but not so much. Now, another thing about a Z06 that's kind of going to be a little bit of a con to it, and I realize how trivial and how silly this point probably sounds, is the gas mileage on that thing is absolutely atrocious. You're going to get single-digit gas mileage on it. Now, if you're buying a Corvette, and if you're buying especially a Z06, or you're looking for that type of car in the first place, gas mileage is not really going to be a huge concern of yours because that's not what you're buying the car for obvious reasons. So, kind of a moot point. Another thing about that car that is kind of a little bit of a pro that I mentioned before, which I also kind of find to be a little bit of a con, is the bespoke engine in that car. The LT6 is going to be the only car that engine comes in. As a result, parts are not going to be as common, they're going to be more expensive, and they're going to be a little bit harder to come by. And if you have to find somebody to work on that vehicle, you might have a little bit of a hard time finding somebody you either trust to work on it or finding someplace that actually can work on the thing in the first place, should you ever have some actual big detrimental repair to do. Now, this also can obviously lead to very expensive repairs and maintenance on it. Now, most of these cars are going to still be covered under warranty, so repairs, should anything ever fail, shouldn't be an issue per se, because it should be covered under warranty. But there is going to be a time when your warranty runs out. And when that warranty runs out, it is going to be expensive to repair. That engine is also very, very, very complicated and very complex. It has a lot of moving parts and a lot of things to it, and that's kind of a con to it in the sense that just like how the E-Ray has a con because the hybrid system is so complex, that engine is also very complex, so it can be very difficult to work on. I mean, we all know about the lifter noise that comes along with it too. If you have that repair, as long as it's on one cylinder head, it can be done in the car. But if it's on the other cylinder head, the whole car and the whole engine has to be dropped out of the car in order to make that repair. Now, this is an engine, remember, that comes ultimately with 4 timing chains that are connected to oil pumps and camshafts and just the rest of the car, the rest of the components inside. It ultimately has 7 oil pumps, 32 valves, 4 camshafts. The starter is in the valley. It's got a lot of complex parts to it. And particularly when it comes to even things like the lifters and stuff like that, remember there are these little caps that go on the lifters with the rocker arms to actually open and close the valves. Those little caps are specific to each specific point that they're on. They're measured when they go on the factory. So if you take somebody who takes this engine apart and puts it back together and doesn't mark those caps to the specific valve that they came off at, you're going to have problems. This engine is very complex. It's very in-depth. It's a beautiful engine, and it's a masterpiece of engineering, but it is very complex, and that can lead to problems later on, should that be the case. Now, and because it's always it's like a first model year engine, they've never had an engine before, it doesn't have a time-proven legacy behind it for its reliability. So far, they've been pretty good, but time will tell. Especially it being a flat plane crank, those things are not known to have the greatest longevity to them, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe GM figured it out. We'll have to wait and see. Another con to the Z06 is going to be these things right here, carbon ceramic brakes. Carbon ceramic brakes are not standard on a Z06. You have to pay the extra option for them. You can't get them separate from the Z07 package, or if you get the Z07, they're going to come with them. With the E-Ray, they are standard. Now, carbon ceramic brakes are a whole nother topic of conversation. There's a lot of pros and cons that come along with them. I personally love them. I hope that I never have to really replace anything or do it too much to them because they are extremely expensive. But they don't kick up any brake dust, and once they are burnished, man, do they stop. They stop really, really well. So that's just a little bit of a negative. You're paying that much for the car, and don't forget the Z06 is going to be a standard car. The standard price of a Z06 is higher than an E-Ray, but an E-Ray is going to come standard with carbon ceramic brakes, where you have to pay extra on that for a Z06. Another thing about the Z06 is the engine, or excuse me, the computer that comes with the Z06. That computer is a locked ECM, at least as of right now. It's about June, or close to June in 2025, and as of right now, that computer has not been unlocked, so you can't tune the thing or modify it in any which way, shape, or form. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to be kind of a non-issue because they're not really going to want to tune it or change it in the first place because they want to keep their warranty intact. But later on, for some other people, this is kind of a big thing. Well, the E-Ray computer is tunable, and you can unlock it, and you can actually modify it to the point where you're going to be able to make some adjustments to it. You can't do that with a Z06, and that's going to make a lot of performance options on the car a little bit difficult because everything is going to have to be done via piggyback computers. Now, the LT6 also comes with a very high compression ratio, 12.5 to 1. That's pretty high. Now, obviously, it needs it for the type of car that it is and the engine that they designed, or the way that they designed the engine itself. But this also is going to lead to a couple of other issues. Number one, if you should want to boost the car ultimately, eventually, add supercharger, twin turbos, or whatever, well, honestly, good luck adding a supercharger because I can't imagine how a positive displacement would work on it. And you could add a ProCharger or something like that, or a centrifugal one, but again, it'd be very complex, probably be pretty hard to do. Easiest route would be twin turbos. Because the car has such a high compression ratio, you don't have a lot of room in there for boost, so you can't really go too high on boost. So again, you're going to be kind of limited. Now, you can take the engine out, rebuild it, and put different internals in to lower the compression ratio to increase the boost, but now you're defeating the entire purpose of the car and what it was built for, and you're kind of doing it a little bit of a disservice. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing something like that. Now, other cars, things like that, like say the Stingray or an E-Ray that has the LT2 with a 6.2 in it, you can bore and stroke those out to a 7-liter or 427 or whatever, and you can modify the actual engine itself. That 5.5 liter LT6, you're not really going to want to mess with the internals as far as the displacement goes on it, just because of the way the engine is and the sheer engineering of it. Another thing about it is that because of the nature of the engine and because it was designed, and again, if this is what you're going for, this is going to be perfect for you, and I understand why they did it, because of the nature of the vehicle, is the car doesn't really have any low-end torque. Any Z06 owner will tell you this. There really is not a lot of power down low. But again, that's the sheer design of the engine. It's the way it's meant to be. So you really have to be high in the RPM range to really feel any power in the car. This was something that was really prevalent to me when I was driving it for a little while that I had it, okay? So while you're driving it around, you really got to live in that RPM range, that really high RPM range. And again, that just kind of leads back to the point where I was talking about before, how the car just kind of never shuts up. Well, in order to get any real power out of it, to have any fun on it, the thing has to be screaming. It has to be. There's no other way around it. The flat plane crank also kind of worries me a little bit in terms of long-term reliability issues. Flat plane cranks in the automotive world have not known to have been high mileage, long-lasting engines. A lot of that goes down to, or boils down to, the forces within the engine, primary, secondary balancing, and things like that. They're just not known for that type of thing. But again, who knows? Maybe GM figured it out. It'll prove me wrong. And then one of the last things to talk about with the Z06 that I always thought was kind of a silly configuration was that you can get the Z07 package in a hardtop convertible. Now, from a marketing standpoint, I fully understand why they did this. Not everybody that gets a Z07 is going to take the thing to the track. They're not. In fact, most owners probably aren't. And maybe they want the Z07 because they're going to take it out for spirited driving, through canyons, through hills, whatever, okay? But when you're getting a car with the Z07 package, which is meant to be track focused, it's kind of contradictory for you to get a hardtop convertible and add weight to it in that sense. Now, granted, it doesn't add a whole ton of weight. It's less than 100 pounds, but it does add weight. But then you take a car that is really, truly track focused or something that you really want to get for the track, like say when Chevy put out the Camaro ZL1. Well, they put out the ZL1 in the 1LE version, and they did a lot of things to it to trim it down because saving weight was a big thing. The glass was a little bit thinner. It wasn't available with a sunroof and things like that. The rear subframe was also different. So if it was really meant to be a track-focused car, the Z07 package would not come, I think, in my personal opinion, in a hardtop convertible option, and you would only be able to get it in coupe form, again, for weight purposes. So those are just some things that I'll mention about a Z06. I can't talk too much about the Z06 because I am not an owner. I've never owned one. I've had one for a little while, but I haven't really had the same experience as, say, an owner would have over a couple of months. Now, I will say some more stuff about the E-Ray, and I'm going to have a lot more stuff to say about the E-Ray, both pros and cons, because, well, I own an E-Ray, and I've had one for much longer. One of my big draws to the E-Ray was the actual engine that came with it, the LT2 V8, 6.2-liter overhead valve V8 engine, based off of Chevy's legendary, well-known small block. Okay, this is a Gen 5 Chevy small block, and as far as the small Chevy small blocks have gone, these things have more than proven themselves in the long-term reliability. I'm a big fan of that, and this also goes back to the whole thing I was talking about before, is that this engine, because of the computer that's in it, has been cracked, and you can get into it if you want in order to tune it and change things to have it be really to your advantage. A couple of things about the E-Ray that I really like too is that it comes standard with carbon ceramic brakes, just like I mentioned before. You don't have to pay extra for it. It's standard right off the bat. You're guaranteed going to get them. Another big pro to the E-Ray that I really love is the stealth and the shuttle modes. This was a big thing for me. I really liked it. I never thought that I would be somebody who would say that I really like something like that or the idea of it, but I have to tell you, it really comes in handy a lot. I leave for work very early in the morning, and I don't have to worry about waking up my neighbors, or if I'm ever going somewhere and I just kind of want it to be quiet, I can do it. Granted, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass if I'm already driving the car, and then I have to turn it off to get it started up in that stealth mode to go where to do whatever I'm doing to keep it quiet, but the option is there. I'm a big fan of it. I really like it. And I have a video coming up explaining stealth and shuttle modes completely and the differences between the two. Another big pro that I really like about it too is something that's very obvious, and that is the all-wheel drive. I love the all-wheel drive. Now, I live in Southern California. All-wheel drive is not really something that is a necessity for me. It's definitely a luxury more than anything else. But I love that it has all-wheel drive. The car is just plain nuts off the line. It grips like crazy. It turns in the corners very well as a result of it, and the power is always there, and you always feel it pushing and pulling you, and you just feel like in such complete control. It's great off the line because of the all-wheel drive, and that's something that the Z06 is just never going to have because it's rear-wheel drive only. Now, the ZR1 will be a little bit of a different story from what they say, but when that car comes out, we'll see what happens with that. Another big pro to this car also too is, unlike the Z06, it has plenty of power on the low end. There's plenty of torque all the time. You're always going to feel it, and you don't have to be screaming on the throttle in order to feel that power. It's going to throw you back into the seat with the torque that it has, and that to me is a big, big pro. Another big pro for this car is something that's definitely going to be very unique to this car in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, there have been a variety of people that have had transmission problems with these cars. Now, you go online, and a lot of people make it sound like these transmissions are failing left and right, and so on and so forth, which I don't believe is true. A lot of people will say, it's always the people that have bad things happen to them that are the loudest. And this is a case, this is a point to me. So, but nonetheless, there have been a fair amount of transmission failures. One of the big things with this car is if you have to get it up onto a tow truck, and get it into neutral. If you can't start the engine, or if you have some other sort of fault or failure on it, or it won't go into park or whatever, you can't get it on a tow truck without some specialty tools and equipment to get it up there. This thing has an electronic pump inside the transmission. So if you ever need to move it or get it up on there, or the transmission fails, or it won't let you put it in the drive or reverse or whatever, you can theoretically still use shuttle or stealth mode and get it into neutral, at least with the gas engine, and use the front drive motor to get you where you're going, to get it onto a tow truck or move it or something like that. A lot of people have had problems where, say, reverse failed and they couldn't reverse the car. Well, they were stuck in their garage, like on this. If I had to get this car out of this garage, it's got to go in reverse. Well, if it was a Stingray and I had a problem that a lot of people have had, I wouldn't be able to get it out because I wouldn't be able to shift it into reverse or neutral. However, it being an E-Ray and having that electric pump in the transmission, I can get the rear into neutral and use the front drive motor to get me out of the garage and get it onto a tow truck or whatever. Hopefully that never happens, but it's just a little piece of reassurance that it's probably going to be there should I need it. Now, of course, that system could fail also, or in conjunction with whatever else failed, but it's just one more thing that I think is a little bit of an advantage in that sense. Now compare some of the numbers of the E-Ray to that of numbers of the Z06 when it comes to horsepower, torque, quarter mile, 0 to 60. Well, the E-Ray pretty much has them all beat with the exception of horsepower. It has 655 horsepower, while the Z06 has 670. However, the E-Ray more than beats it out in the torque department, and it has a faster 0 to 60 time and a faster quarter mile time. Now, if they were ever somewhere where the Z06 has room to catch up, is it going to catch up and pass it? Yeah, but is it going to blow right by it? I don't think so. Of course, anything's possible, but who knows? We'll see. But so far, those numbers look to be much better to me on a car that starts with a lower base price, and you can get more options such as the carbon ceramic brakes and keep the car at a lower cost. Now, another big concern when it comes to these types of cars, and particularly these types of buyers that go along with it, is, well, what happens when the battery fails or the system fails and I have to replace a battery pack, so on and so forth. We've all heard horror stories about people that have Teslas or Priuses or whatever, and they had to go ahead and replace their hybrid battery packs, and they were extremely expensive. Well, this is true, mostly because those cars have much, much bigger battery packs. They're much, much larger. So this car only has a 1.9 kilowatt hour battery pack. Well, right now, the market value for a price per kilowatt hour is about $115. You can look it up. I'll show you right now. So take that into account. $115, not even 2 kilowatts, so double it. So $230-ish, somewhere around there. Now, of course, there's going to be other stuff that goes along with it that you're going to have to add on to it, so on and so forth. But it's not going to be this crazy thing that's going to be super expensive to replace, like $30,000, $40,000 on some of these Teslas or something that you hear about. It's going to be cheaper. Plus, you have to remember, this thing comes with an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on the hybrid drive system. And that's mandated by the federal government. They have to do it, okay? They're not doing it to be nice. They have to do it. That's a pretty good warranty. Plus, Taj Druckner himself has even said that the hybrid system on this car will probably outlive the car itself. So that's one less worry that you have when buying something like this. Should you ever have to replace the battery pack for whatever reason, my guess is total cost, because replacing it is not very labor intensive. It's just right in that tunnel. Everything's very easy connected to get to. I would say $1,000 or $2,000 tops. And even that's probably in the future when these things finally fail, in which case, if they do fail, and in which case the batteries are probably even going to be cheaper at that point anyways. Now, the electric motor in this thing is another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about. It's rated at 160 horsepower. However, there have been a lot of speculations and even sometimes proven where it actually puts out even more than that. Some have said an upwards of 180 plus. And this has been shown on dynos and on the car's internal display. Now, whether or not you want to trust that, yeah, okay, I get it if you don't want to trust that. But it has put down more horsepower on these dynos than 160. Or it's put down 160 at the wheel, and you have to take into account drivetrain loss. There's obviously not nearly as much with an electric drivetrain, but there is some. So it's not going to ever put down 100% at the wheel. So if it's putting down 160, it's going to be putting out more at the actual motor itself. This car too is another thing too, where if you look at a lot of people who buy a lot of these high performance Corvettes and have really specialized in them, a lot of them gravitate towards the E-Ray. Case in point, you have Andrew, the owner of Complete Street Performance in Pennsylvania. He has an E-Ray. He loves it. Then you also have Rick Corvette Conti, who has a big channel. He was talking about the Z06 for the longest time and how much he loved the Z06 and how much he wanted to buy one. But then he drove an E-Ray. Now, I'm not going to say his tune changed, but he definitely started thinking twice about which one he wanted and which one he was going to get. Then you have Corey from Paragon. He's got his E-Ray. He loves that thing. He has the best. Then you have another one, Alex Pites from Pites Performance. He's got an E-Ray. He loves that thing. All these guys bought E-Rays over Z06s for a reason, because I think that they truly see the potential of it. There's another YouTube channel that I watch quite often called Brink of Speed. And he did it multiple times where he had Z06 owners come and drive his E-Ray, and they were all impressed, and a lot of them have said, I should have bought the E-Ray instead. Now, was that just for clicks for his channel, or what he wanted them to say for his channel's sake? Who knows? But it seems to be a pretty common opinion, and in my opinion, I've seen a lot more E-Ray owners, or excuse me, a lot more Z06 owners say they wish they had bought an E-Ray than the other way around. Now, I may be wrong, but I'm just telling you what my personal experience has been. Now, another thing about the E-Ray is that it has a lower base price. An E-Ray starts at about $106.9. A Z06 starts at about, I believe, $112, somewhere around there. So because you're going to be getting more right off the bat with a lower base price, that might be the difference as to what you want to do. Say you're in the market for one of these cars and you're having a hard time deciding which one you want to get, okay? But you only have a budget for a certain amount of things. And let's say you really want to get a 2LZ or a 3LZ, but you also really want a hardtop convertible, and you can't get both because it's just going to be out of your price range. Well, you could get the hardtop convertible option in the E-Ray and save that money there, or you could get a Z06 coupe but not get the hardtop convertible, depending on what you want. So you can configure more with the E-Ray because it has a lower base price. The difference in base price is about the same as to how much it would cost for you to get a coupe versus a convertible. So if you're really weighing in which one you want and you're really like dead set on, say, getting a hardtop convertible, regardless of which car it is, that's definitely a factor to equivalent into it. Now, another factor that I think will come into play will be later on once these cars, especially once they're stopped being made. I really do think that this is going to be the type of car that later on, it's going to become much more desirable after the fact. I really think it's going to be a lot like how the old CTS V2, the wagons, when they came out, nobody really bought those when they came out because everybody kind of looked at them like they were a little bit silly. Now they're very desirable, and they actually command a pretty high premium. Not pretty high, but decently well. They're very desirable, they're very rare, and people want to get their hands on them. And when people get them, they very rarely let them go. So that's just another thing to consider too, because I really think that's going to be the case with this. Now, another thing too that a lot of people talk about is this battery right here, the lithium-ion battery for the 12-volt system. Very minor thing, but it does way less than a standard lead-acid battery. Now, of course, you can just get a Z06 and replace it with, say, an anti-gravity battery, in which case, if you want an anti-gravity battery, go to Horsepower Obsessed channel and use their code to get it. And that'll definitely help you out. But that's just another thing to consider, is this lithium-ion battery is going to be a little bit lighter. Now, of course, the whole car is going to be heavier. In the first place, it's kind of a moot point, but kind of get what I'm saying. Now, the next point I'll make is going to be applicable to a lot of people all over the country, but there is a group of people where it's not really going to apply. Me being one of them, living in Southern California. This is an all-season, all-weather car. You can take it and use it 365 days a year, depending on where you live. Now, of course, there are going to be some extremes where you're not going to be able to use it, or if there's too much snow on the ground or whatever, but there's nothing that would stop, nothing that wouldn't stop this car, that wouldn't stop any other normal car for that matter. So that's going to be a big thing. All-wheel drive, and it helps definitely in the snow. I believe you can drive it in up to 6 inches of snow and the car is just fine. And it handles remarkably well. I've been caught out in the rain in this thing many times too, and I never worried about a thing because of the all-wheel drive. Big deal for me, big selling point. If you were out in a Z06, especially if you have the Z07 package or you have Cup 2R tires on there, and you get caught out in the rain, man, you had better be careful because you are going to be scared because that thing's going to be all over the place. And of course, when I say it's going to be all over the place, that's of course if you are not driving it as you should and respecting the weather that you're caught in that car. If you drive it carefully, yeah, you should be okay, but it's still going to give you a little bit of a scare factor. Now, another big thing that I was worried about with this car too before it came out, before I actually saw one, was I was afraid with the electric drive motor being in front and everything, and because of the way the car was going to be configured, that I was going to lose the frunk. Well, as you can clearly see, as everybody's known before, the frunk is still very much with the car. And the amount of space that you lose, it being an E-Ray versus a Stingray, is so minimal that's not even noticeable, and it's difficult to measure. So I'll admit, if this car did not come with a frunk, that would have been a deal breaker for me. But it did come with a frunk, and it's just as usable as in the Stingray. So that was a big point that I really sold me on it as well too. Now, one little stupid little quirky thing that I actually really like this car about this car too is that the sound that the electric motor makes as you are driving it. When you really get on it and you really want to use that electric motor, I know it's gimmicky, I know it's kind of cheesy, I know it's piped in through the speakers a little bit, but that sound the electric motor makes, it's pretty cool. Kind of sounds like a supercharger whine, but it's just a nice little sound that goes along with it to add a little extra power. Another big advantage of this car too is that the gas mileage. Now again, you're not buying one of these cars for the gas mileage, but if you want to drive this car conservatively, especially because it can go into V4 mode, which, if you ask me, is a con for any of these vehicles, but that's a whole nother topic that is a very sensitive issue for a lot of people, especially for all you guys out there that have L87 engines in your trucks right now. But the gas mileage on this car is pretty much exactly the same as the Stingray. It's going to be better than a Z06. Now, again, you're not buying this car for gas mileage, but it's just another little quirk and a little point to make. And just to finish off some of the other things I'm talking about before, just like I mentioned before about how the Z06 is not tunable and this car is, again, big perk. Just wanted to mention it again. The other thing about this car too is unlike a Z06, it has the ability to calm down. It can be quiet. It can be a cruiser. You can just sit and drive it comfortably, have a conversation and drive it nice. So it can be loud when you want it to be and an animal when you want it to be, but it can also calm down, you know, and that's just a big perk to me. Another thing too is that when it comes to, especially this depends on where you live and a lot of factors within your own personal, but it's going to be much cheaper insurance than a Z06. I compared rates, at least in Southern California, and a Z06 was significantly more expensive when it comes to insurance as compared to this car, believe it or not, at least with my driving record, but I know that's going to be a case-by-case basis depending on the driver and where you live. Now, I know I've talked a lot about all the great things about the E-Ray because I do love this car very much, but there definitely are some cons to it. Okay, there's a couple things about it that I really wish was either available or they could have done with the car, or things that they did do the car that I really don't like. Number one, like I talked about before, there's no Z07 package available for this car. Just like the previous generation Grand Sport, which was the car that this supposedly replaced, at least for the time being, that you could still at least get a Z07 package on it. Now, granted, there's not a whole lot to add on to it, but something like that would have been nice. You can get the ZER package added onto this thing, but it's not really the same. All you're really getting is different tires. Some people question as to whether or not the magnetic ride control is tuned a little bit differently. Who knows? It might be. I don't know. I can't confirm it one way or the other. I don't think it is, though. And you get a little bit of active aero or some aero pieces on it as well too. But other than that, it's not really anything special. And it's only $500, so how much could you possibly get for $500? So there's no Z07 package available on this car. Another thing about this car is because it is all-wheel drive and because you have that electric motor in front down there, you can kind of feel the car dragging a little bit as you're driving. You can feel the electric motor kind of being pushed against as you're driving it. It's something you get used to pretty quickly, but there definitely is a bigger difference in the feel of the drive on this car, say compared to a Stingray, because of that. You can feel the dragginess of it, especially if you have that the Charge Plus feature on. At that point, you can really notice it and you really feel it dragging because the brakes are a little bit applied. So you do feel that. Another thing that they incorporated into it, and I get it was probably a mandate, they put it on there for whatever reason, but is the auto start stop feature. I hate that feature. Most people hate that feature. However, good thing you can at least turn it off, but I'll admit, it's a little bit of annoying that you got to press a button every single time to turn it off, but first world problems, right? But at least you can turn it off. If you couldn't turn that feature off, I will admit that probably would have been a deal breaker for me because I really hate that feature and I turn it off every time. Now, another advantage to that too is with the shuttle mode and stealth mode, if you start the car up in stealth mode, that feature is automatically turned off. So if you ever start it in stealth mode, you don't have to turn it off with the button. It's just automatically going to stay off. But nonetheless, a couple of cons to the car that are there that I either wish weren't there or I wish were available. Now, another supposed con to this car, and this is very subjective depending on however you deal with it, is that the car has outboard exhaust. It doesn't have that center exhaust that Corvettes have been very iconic in having. It's one of the only ones, at least in recent times, that has that outboard exhaust, at least in the United States. Otherwise, in overseas, things are different, but that's a whole nother story. Some people like it, some people hate it. I don't mind it. I actually think it looks nice, but I don't really care if it had inboard or the center exhaust or the outboard exhaust. But nonetheless, some people wouldn't like that about it, and it would kind of be a thing for them too. But again, very subjective. Another thing that I really don't like about the car, and I really wish they had done a little bit more work on, is the name. It's called the E-Ray. Okay, I get what they were going for. It's not a bad name. I just think that they could have came up with a better name for it. And because it was called the E-Ray, that kind of automatically turned a lot of people off to it right off the bat too. They could have called it something else, but I just think the name is maybe a little bit cheesy. But nonetheless, it's what they called it. It's not a bad name, but I just think they could have came up with something a little bit better. Now, another thing about this car that is going to be a little bit of a con to it is the complexity of the actual car itself. I recently put out a whole video detailing the entire complex system of the hybrid drivetrain of it. The battery packs, the drive motors, the fluids and everything that are associated with it, and the cooling systems, both front and rear, that are associated with it. It is complex, and if you don't know what you're doing and don't know how to work on it, it can be something that would be very intimidating to work on. And some shops might not even want to work on it either because they'd be scared of it. But you know, it's just another thing to consider. Now, it has that trade-off in that the actual gasoline engine itself is far simpler than that of the LT6 in the Z06. So that's kind of where it shares some complexity challenges with the Z06. The Z06's engine itself is much more complex, but it doesn't have the hybrid system. The E-Ray has the hybrid system, but has a much simpler gasoline engine. Another thing that kind of bugged me a little bit on this car was the wheel design. Now, not that the wheel design is bad on these things, because it's a classic 5-spoke wheel design, and I think they actually look pretty good. But the thing that I have the issue with is that the wheel design, you really only have 2 choices, at least in the model years that are out now. I think future model years are going to have different designs, or maybe they already do. I don't remember exactly what's going to be on the 25s and 26s. But right now, you only have the 5-spoke that are on this car right now, and you can get them in different colors, but it's still the same design. Or you can get the carbon fiber wheels on them. Again, a 5-spoke design. They're both very, very similar, and they look very much the same. And it's not really much of a choice or an option. Now, of course, you can always get whatever aftermarket wheels you want, but it would have been nice that out of the 2 wheel designs that they offer for this thing, one of them was at least a little bit more different from the other. They're both basically 5-spoke, but hey, that's just one of the things of the car, I guess. And the last thing I want to touch about this car is its infotainment system. It is dependent on Google. It is a wonderful system. It works very well, and I actually like it very, very much. However, some people like the older system a little bit better. 2023 was the last model year of that older infotainment design. So if you want a Z06, but you like that older system, you can get a 2023 model year and get that older system, because the new Google system is dependent on a couple of things. You really should or kind of have to be logged into it with your Google account, so therefore it's going to be linked. Not everybody likes that. But you also have to have a subscription plan with certain things, like if you want to get navigation, if you don't have your phone, or if you want to get apps on it, so otherwise, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be much more dependent on a subscription plan and things like that. So if you want an E-Ray, you don't have the choice. You cannot get the old infotainment system because the 2024 was the first model year for it, so you're stuck with that Google system, whether you love it or whether you hate it. But if you get a Z06, you at least do have a choice where you can get a 23 model year where it has the old system to it, where it was a little less dependent, and things like the GPS was dependent on an actual SIM or actual SD card rather than an internet connection and things like that. So to summarize, it ultimately comes down to whatever choice you have. Now, I made a lot of points on these pros and cons, maybe things you were thought of. You didn't think it was going to push you in one direction or the other, but here's what it boils down to. They're both fantastic cars, especially for the price point and the performance you get for the price point that you're paying, okay? Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than other cars, but for what you're getting, it's going to be very much worth it. They both come with the wide body, they're both fantastic values, and they both have an array of wonderful features. Here's what it basically boils down to. And again, this is just my opinion, very subjective, but it is what it is. If you want a street car, a daily driver car, something that you are just going to drive around town or take out on weekends or something, or you want to drive it through canyon roads, whatever, I would go with the E-Ray. If you are going to buy a car that you are purely going to take to the track and really track use it for what it's meant for, I would go with the Z06. Now, some people will say the Z06 is the more iconic nameplate, that it'll hold its value a little bit better, but who knows, yet to be seen. Yeah, the Z06 is a very iconic nameplate, and nobody's ever going to scoff at a Z06 or anything like that. But they've also made a whole lot more Z06s than they have E-Rays. So that's why I think that there is a chance that the E-Ray could actually hold its value a little bit better in the long term. But that's yet to be seen, and only time will tell. So anyways, here's my points on that. I just wanted to make a little video as to what you thought if you were on the fence about either one. So this is, again, a real world owner's perspective on it. I own the E-Ray. I've had a Z06 for a short time, not a long time, but that's just my comparison. So whatever you choose and whatever you go with, it's going to be a great car either way. But whatever your needs are, hopefully this video clarifies a little bit as to what you're going after. But anyways, I hope this helps. Good luck.